is our 17th annual Fred Friendly First Amendment Award, and we were so pleased that we had Fred and Ruth for the first 5. All of us at Quinnipiac University, and particularly our School of Communications, Fred was a great friend and obviously one of the true giants in the field of broadcast journalism. And all of us at Quinnipiac and our School of Communications feel a great honor that we have this ability to not only recognize a great journalist like Gwen Ifill this year, but also we can use this event to keep alive the memory and the accomplishments of one of the greatest broadcast journalists and leaders in the field of communications. As I said, we were blessed to have Fred for the first 5 awards, but we've been even more blessed to have had Ruth for 17. And she was a very important part in starting this award, and we're just delighted and honored that she's continued to be involved in helping us select the honoree each year and making remarks about the honorees. So at this time, please join me in recognizing Ruth Friendly.
I'm not as tall as you, John. I had to lower that. Well, it is such a delight to be here once again. As you said, Quinnipiac's 17th annual Fred Friendly First Amendment Award luncheon. I guess I was a little younger then. Thanks to you, John Leahy, and Lynn Bushnell, and Carl and Natalie, and your whole top team. You've done it again. I consider this the most elegant luncheon of the year, with substance for body and mind. And I'm thrilled that Gwen Ifill is receiving this year's award. I'm just sorry Fred isn't standing here in those big shoes of his 13.5 quadruple E. He would be equally excited. I've been reading Gwen Ifill's book right here, The Breakthrough, Politics and Race in the Age of Obama. It's a perceptive analysis of the rising number of people of color in political positions and the role of race in the future of American politics. I read through the introduction and hit on her description of the racist clashes in Boston in the 1970s. It was sparked by court decrees to integrate the schools. At the time, Gwen, attending Simmons College and walking through the Fenway Park neighborhood, saw, to quote her, Boston's finest in riot gear stepping in to prevent clashes at English High School. It was a scene that played out again and again in the city and again throughout the country, end quote. Ifill reported on the riots while working as an intern during her senior year at the Herald-American, a local newspaper. One day, she found a note on her desk, and it read, "Go home." I remember those turbulent times, but let me tell you why they loom so large in my mind today. If Fred were standing here, he would be recalling how he fought to get programs on CBS in the early 1960s to report on issues of race in America. Who Stands for the South and Who Speaks for Birmingham showed and reported on the mob attacks taking place against the freedom fighters. Those programs took many out of their comfort zone. Fred recalled that stations in the Deep South, rather than run the programs, put signs on the screen saying, "Trouble on the line," and the programs didn't air. It didn't stop Fred, and that evil note on Gwen's desk didn't stop her. The Herald-American recognized her journalistic talents, and after she graduated, hired her. That was just the beginning of an outstanding career in political reporting. On she went in succession to the Baltimore Evening Sun, the Washington Post, and the New York Times. And it wasn't long before all three networks were vying for her. At NBC, she became congressional correspondent covering the Whitewater investigation and the Clinton impeachment. In 1999, Gwen moved to PBS, becoming the managing editor and moderator on Washington Week, and senior political correspondent for the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer. We have been listening to you there, Gwen, ever since, and if I miss you on the tube, I see you on the net. Gwen, you can do it all. A top writer, a great reporter, and a wonderful communicator. You even served as a panelist on the Fred Friendly seminars, the ultimate test. I can tell you, it's grueling. The program was Genes on Trial, and we needed a tough, authentic, articulate reporter to keep our hypothetical scenario real, and that's what we got. And what about Gwen's memorable service as moderator in 2008, the 2008 vice presidential debates? You remember Sarah Palin versus Joe Biden? There's a story about the debate that illustrates how gutsy, determined, and dedicated Gwen Ifill is to her craft. As moderator, Gwen was to fly to Washington University in St. Louis for the debate. Going along with her was Linda Winslow, who heads the NewsHour and is a very reliable source. A couple of days before the debate, Gwen had an accident, a serious one, falling down the stairs and winding up with a very badly broken ankle. There was no question that she needed surgery. It was just so swollen and much too swollen to proceed. Linda called the debate people. Consternation. You can imagine, put yourself in their shoes. Was there going to be any way to get Gwen to St. Louis? A top orthopedist was pulled in. His firm remark, "We can't operate yet, but I couldn't survive if you didn't moderate." So he sent her off to St. Louis on crutches, bandaged, and well splinted. As Gwen and Linda wheelchaired through the airports, people cheered her on, saying, "You have to moderate the debate." And in St. Louis, Gwen immediately went to work refining questions, refusing to take any painkillers, afraid that it would cloud her judgment. And who knows what the media would do with that. Gwen was ready to go the next day, and as she sat at the moderator table and her ankle resting on a stool concealed under the table. Gwen, you were so focused on running a good debate, the ankle seemed to go out of your mind. It was classic Gwen, the ultimate trooper. I understand even Sarah Palin's father shook her hand saying, "I hear you've got a bum hoof. I admire you." And by the way, you all recall that following that event, Sarah Palin had the honor of seeing herself role-played several times by Tina Fey. Tina was tops. But did that raise any feelings of envy in Gwen? No way. Gwen gets to lay claim to none other than Queen Latifah, impersonating her on Saturday Night Live. Pretty good. I could go on and regale you with tales of Gwen's singing and dancing talents, but it's time to hear from you, Gwen. What a journey you've had so far. Congratulations on receiving the Fred Friendly First Amendment Award from Quinnipiac. I can't help but feel the presence of Fred here. He would be nodding hearty approval. Congratulations.
Ladies and gentlemen, our 2010 Fred Friendly First Amendment Award recipient, Gwen Ifill.
Thank you. Thank you. There is so much more to that story that you don't want to hear. So we're just going to move right along. It is true that I did worry that people would say, well, she was on drugs, too, at the debate, so I decided not to do that. Thank you, John Leahy. Thank you, Ruth Friendly. It was very sweet. Thank you for quizzing Linda Winslow, my boss, who, of course, gave up everything. Well, not quite everything, but a lot of things. And thank you to all my friends at Quinnipiac College. I was there, Quinnipiac University. I was there a few years ago to speak there, and I have to say, I have more than once had to be very thankful to Quinnipiac for saving me because of the polls. As a political reporter, you spend an awful lot of time trying to make sense of things you actually know very little about, and Quinnipiac polls never fail to deliver. And I also am relieved to be someplace where I'm not confused with Queen Latifah. Which, frankly, it could be worse. My other great fear, because she had played me in 2004 in the debate skit, but my great fear in reality was that they were going to get Kenan Thompson to play me in drag. So when you consider the options, you kind of are happy with this. I am thrilled to be here to accept this award, and I have to admit, first of all, that when I got the letter from Ruth inviting me to accept this award, I was pretty certain it was all a mistake. I suffer from the classic imposter's complex. So as I prepared to come here today, I decided to look up the list of previous winners, and then my insecure side really kicked in. I looked at the list and I saw Tom Brokaw, my old anchorman, Morley Safer, Lesley Stahl, Ted Koppel, Jim Lehrer, my current anchorman, and Tim Russert, who 2 years ago yesterday we lost. And who the one time I've been at this lunch before was to honor him. So I feel like he's kind of up on the stage with me as well. It was such company. And here I was, just a little black girl from Queens, being asked to walk among the giants. So I thank you for that. But then I thought to myself, you know, if George Clooney could play Fred Friendly, I could do this. So I come to accept this award at a time which I can't think of as a better time to be talking about what we have to do in this business. I spend a lot of time on college campuses these days talking to students. I imagine I am doing my part to save the world, save journalism at least for the next generation. I tell these students many things. I tell them that Wikipedia is a good place to start, but not a good place to end. You'd be surprised how much they need to be told that. I tell them that Jon Stewart is a fine topical comedian, but they have to understand first what the story is before they get to laugh at the joke, and that's where journalism comes in. I also tell them when they say to me, you know, I don't watch the news, I only watch Jon Stewart. I say to them, who do you think Jon Stewart watches? And you know what? That pulls them up short. It makes me look kind of hip with the Queen Latifah thing, and it has the advantage of being true. I tell them that journalism is not dead, which is, of course, where Fred Friendly feared we were heading. And we have often worried that he was right. Television news is not all it could be, but it is still essential and it is still important. The challenges are different now than they were for Fred. We have access to all of this information, and we have so little news. After 20 years in journalism at 4 newspapers and in network television, I landed at PBS 11 years ago this fall. And for that, I probably have Fred Friendly to thank. That's because he was the one who figured out that non-commercial television could be the smartest platform available to do the news, to do the jobs that we want to do. It could be a home for news and information and for Fred Friendly seminars, too. I figured it out late in the game. I figured it out mostly when Les Crystal and Sharon Rockefeller came and made me an offer I couldn't refuse to come work for the NewsHour and Washington Week. An incredible combination of things when you stop and think about it that allows me to take advantage of all the things I've learned in this business and have my own play box on Friday night where I play it in the sand with my friends who are really, really smart. As a result, not only do I get to indulge my junkie-like addiction for politics on a near daily basis, but I also get to ask all the questions I like and do it in a way that takes me and you, I hope, beyond the soundbite. It doesn't mean I always get answers to my questions, as moderating debates has taught me, But it does mean that people are smart enough to figure out when their questions are not being answered, and I'm smart enough to allow them that. On both Washington Week and we now have renamed ourselves the PBS NewsHour, we approach the news with a fairly simple premise. We assume that you can decide what you think if we give you the information to work with. Sounds simple enough, but it turns out it's not so simple. Unlike our cable TV cousins, we hope you never actually know what we think. In fact, if you think you know, you're probably wrong. And we hope that you never think we reach any personal conclusions at all. We believe that folks are still hungry to know, that the rigors of daily life have not yet managed to entirely obliterate our need for information that happens beyond the ends of our noses, beyond our neighborhoods, and beyond our borders. And that once we provide that information accurately and even-handedly, you can make up your own minds without interference from us. In the first vice presidential debate I moderated with Dick Cheney and John Edwards, who, it should be said, I would have different questions for today. I remember asking them a question about HIV and in the African-American community, among straight women in particular. I kind of thought that in the vice presidential debate, I had to ask them something they weren't going to be asked anywhere else. And I was kind of curious about what they might say. And I prefaced it by saying, you know, we're not going to ask about AIDS in Africa. I want to ask about AIDS in this country. And the reactions went like this. Dick Cheney said, really? That was the answer. And John Edwards said, well, you know, in Africa, I believe this is what we should do, which proves he hadn't listened to the question. And there are those who said to me afterward, why didn't you say, but you're not answering the question, and pound on the table and yell at them? And I said, you know, I think if you're watching a vice presidential debate, you are engaged and you are focused, and you probably know they didn't answer the question, and that is your answer to the question. And that was my belief. And in the years that have passed, I still to this day get mail from people thanking me for the question because it answered a question for them about what the priorities were of these candidates. If I had chased them around the table, or if I had said to Sarah Palin when she said, I don't feel the need to answer the moderator's questions, if I had said to her, huh, what? It would have been a story about me. Or in the case of Sarah Palin, it would have been a story about a cat fight, because of course, two women, it's always a cat fight, right? But I realized that I had to put my faith in people at home to understand what they were being told or what they weren't being told, not for me to tell it for them. I've been fortunate in my career to work for and with some of the best people in journalism, including some of the people who have received the award in the past and some of the people in this room. But my curiosity, I have to tell you, about journalism and about news truly started long before I ever stepped into a newsroom. I inherited an abiding interest in the world around me from my parents. We grew up in my house reading the newspaper every day. I know it sounds quaint now, but I'm not really that old. We grew up, however, watching Huntley Brinkley and Walter Cronkite talk about assassinations and sit-ins. On second thought, maybe I am that old. But my parents, who were immigrants who came to this country because they chose to be Americans, they took care to expose us every day to the connection between what was happening around us and what was happening in our lives, and how these two things intersected. So in the end, journalism for me was the perfect coming together of all that, and I thank them for that. I'm deeply grateful to be a journalist. I don't have to live in China or Kenya or Somalia or Zimbabwe, where the price for telling the truth is that they shut down your newspaper or burn down your television station for criticizing the government. I don't live in places where writing the truth can get you killed. I live in a country instead where the First Amendment provides a cloak, but also a responsibility. And where I get to do what I love, and on days like today, I get to be acknowledged for it. Accepting an award in the name of a man who saw what television could and still can be. A man who I never met, but who shaped the world that I live in so many ways. I found this that Fred Friendly said, which I hadn't even realized that he had said, but it's what I've been saying in so many places around the country as I travel and speak about this craft. He said, our job is not to make up anybody's mind, but to open minds and to make the avenue of decision-making so intensive that you can escape only by thinking. What a common and amazing thought. It's fair to say that I live up, and I try to live up to Friend Friendly's ideal every day. So thank you very much for this honor. Thank you.
Thank you, Gwen, for those wonderful, indeed inspiring remarks. And regardless of whether you see yourselves as one of the giants, I can tell you that the students today, and not only, I dare say, not only in Quinnipiac School of Communications, but throughout this country, and the faculty who teach them, you are truly a giant in the field of journalism. And we're pleased to add your name to the group of giants that we honor with the Fred Friendly Award. Again, my thanks to all of you for coming and for all the things you do to make our School of Communications an outstanding School of Communications. This concludes our program, and we look forward to seeing all of you back here again next year for another honoree. Thank you.